It began with a photograph, not a press conference, not a carefully worded statement from a podium draped with flags, but a single image, unfiltered, unedited, caught in the raw sunlight of the Middle East. It raced across news feeds and encrypted messaging groups faster than journalists could verify its origin. At first glance, the scene seemed almost unremarkable. A patch of pale, sunburned hills in the Jordan Valley, the kind of backdrop that has carried millennia of human footsteps yet changed little in its physical appearance. And there, rippling in the hot wind, was a flag. To the casual observer, it could have been mistaken for the banner of a sports club, a local movement, or some forgotten militia. But a closer look told a different story, one that would ignite both political debate and theological reflection. This was not the blue and white flag of Israel, crowned with the Star of David. Nor was it the tricolor of Palestine, or the emblem of any recognized nation. Instead, its field was pure white, almost glowing in the harsh sunlight, and upon it, stitched in a deep golden thread, was a striking design. The outline of the ancient Temple of Jerusalem, rendered in stylized symmetry. Above its gates and courts, a tiny golden crown gleamed. It was the flag of the Third Temple movement, a banner that for some carries the fragrance of hope, restoration, and the fulfillment of God's ancient promises, and for others, the sharp edge of provocation, conflict, and the possibility of a holy war. Why here? Why now? This placement was more than symbolic. It was combustible. The flag was not planted in Jerusalem, nor in the secure precincts of a synagogue courtyard. It was raised in territory the world recognizes as Palestinian, a contested wedge of land in the Jordan Valley, where every grain of sand has been claimed, conquered, and reclaimed by armies and empires. The soil itself is layered with the bones of ancient battles and the prayers of prophets. Here, in the meeting place of desert and river, the Bible records Joshua leading Israel across the Jordan into the Promised Land, Joshua 3. Here, Elijah stood before the waters before his chariot of fire carried him into heaven, 2 Kings 2. Here, the wilderness ends, and the land of promise begins. Now, with a single act of defiant symbolism, the Jordan Valley had become a stage for a prophetic drama, one that, depending on where you stand, either points to the fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision or the stirring of a dangerous, perhaps apocalyptic, fire. For those who long for the temple's return, the sight of that flag was a proclamation. God has not forgotten his word. His house will rise again. For others, it was a warning shot, a sign that religion was no longer content to remain a matter of private devotion, but was stepping back into the volatile arena of territorial power. And in the Middle East, nothing is ever just symbolic. Once a thing is set in motion, it rarely stops without leaving a mark. A day of ashes and trembling. Even as debate over the flag spread, another date approached, one that has been etched into Jewish history for over 2 millennia. Every summer, under the furnace heat of the Middle Eastern sun, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av arrives. For the Jewish people, this is not a holiday but a wound, a day of fasting, lamentation, and mourning. It is Tisha B'Av. On this day, they remember the destruction of Solomon's temple by Babylon in 586 BC, 2 Kings 25, and the destruction of the Second Temple by Rome in AD 70. Both were cataclysms that left Jerusalem in ruins and the nation scattered. Shops close. Music falls silent. The Book of Lamentations is read aloud, its ancient Hebrew words echoing like weeping through the synagogues. Traditionally, this is a day of stillness. But this year, the stillness trembled. For decades, Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount has been prohibited under the so-called status quo. An arrangement struck after Israel regained control of East Jerusalem in 1967 meant to preserve a fragile peace by keeping Jewish religious activity off the mount itself. But on this Tisha B'Av, something happened that was almost unthinkable. More Jewish worshippers than ever ascended the Temple Mount. Some walked quietly, eyes lowered. Others moved their lips in silent prayer. But a few allowed their voices to rise, soft, almost whispers, yet unmistakable. "We will build the temple." These were not chants of protest, nor the loud defiance of political rallies. They were the murmurs of a people daring to speak aloud what for decades had been forbidden. To a tourist, it might have gone unnoticed. But for those who know the history of this hill, its blood, its prophecy, it was like feeling the first tremor before an earthquake. The minister's declaration. Days later, the tension rose higher still. Under the golden glare of the Dome of the Rock, Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, walked the Temple Mount flanked by aides and cameras. His presence alone was politically explosive. His words made it more so. Into the microphones, he declared, "The Temple Mount is ours." And then, with deliberate clarity, Israel must build the temple again. Behind him, small groups of Jewish visitors circled the plaza. Some recited psalms. Others hummed sacred melodies. In another era, indeed in recent decades, police would have stepped in. But now, these acts happened in plain sight. Since 1967, the status quo has been the thread holding the Mount's uneasy peace together. No Jewish or Christian prayer. No religious symbols. No Bibles carried past the gates. The rules were clear until they weren't. The photographs from that day told a simple truth. The rules are already bending. For some Israelis, it was a moment of triumph. For others, it was the crossing of a line that cannot easily be uncrossed. From fringe to mainstream, the temple movement was once a fringe cause, the realm of small religious groups studying ancient priestly laws and crafting ritual vessels in workshops. But the last decade has changed everything. Today, it has become political, organized, and media-savvy. Promotional videos depict computer-rendered visions of a rebuilt temple, teeming with worshippers from many nations. Posters, school books, even highway billboards in some parts of Israel display its image. Slowly, deliberately, the idea is being normalized. And the central question is no longer if people are talking about rebuilding the temple, they are. The question is how. The Mount itself is under Israeli security control, but its day-to-day administration is in the hands of the Islamic Waqf under Jordanian oversight. Any change to that arrangement would send political shockwaves through the Muslim world. 3 possible paths. Analysts speak of 3 scenarios in which Israel could gain full control. A political agreement, perhaps through a broader peace treaty, possibly one offering territorial trade-offs or security guarantees. Israel could gain increased rights on the Mount. Some link this to Daniel 9 verse 27, which describes a covenant made with Israel for a set period, then broken. A crisis event. A major security incident or collapse of the current administration could prompt Israel to take direct control in the name of stability, as happened during the Six-Day War in 1967. Grassroots pressure. If Jewish visitation and informal worship continue to grow, public opinion could reach a tipping point, pressuring leaders to formalize what is already occurring. Each path carries enormous risk, and yet all are openly discussed, not just in religious meetings, but in political and academic forums. The prophetic clock. From a purely political perspective, these developments are the product of security needs, nationalism, and shifting alliances. But from a prophetic standpoint, they are pieces on a much older, divine timetable. Christians who study Daniel and Revelation see in these movements the shadow of the coming Antichrist, a political leader who will seem to bring peace, even allowing the temple to be rebuilt, before betraying that covenant and declaring himself divine within its walls. And that is where the deepest concern lies, not merely in the temple's reconstruction, but in who will ultimately walk its courts. Already fulfilled, yet awaiting. Believers must remember, the most important prophecies about the Messiah have already been fulfilled. Isaiah foretold a virgin would conceive, Isaiah 7 verse 14. Micah named Bethlehem as his birthplace, Micah 5 verse 2. Zechariah described his humble arrival on a donkey, Zechariah 9 verse 9. Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 described his crucifixion centuries before Rome invented it. All of these were fulfilled in Jesus of Nazareth, which is why the New Testament warns that another will come, deceiving many. And the prayer of Christians worldwide is that the Jewish people will see their Messiah before the counterfeit appears. This is not just politics. It is prophecy in motion, and prophecy in motion does not turn back. The flag in the Jordan Valley may fade in the sun, the ministers may rise and fall, and peace agreements may come and go. But there is a greater storyline unfolding, one that began long before these modern cameras and microphones, and one that will end exactly as God has declared. The world watches Jerusalem. Jerusalem watches the Temple Mount, and heaven watches both, the contested hill of the ages. The Temple Mount, known in Hebrew as Har Habayit, is a place where stones remember. Each block in its retaining walls has been touched by centuries of prayer, weeping, blood, and prophecy. For Jews, it is Mount Moriah, where Abraham bound Isaac, Genesis 22. For Muslims, it is Al-Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, from which Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven. For Christians, it is a place where Jesus taught, healed, and wept. The mount is only about 37 acres in size, yet it holds the emotional and spiritual gravity of entire civilizations. It is said in rabbinic tradition that from this hill the dust was gathered to form Adam. The prophets call it the apple of God's eye, Zechariah 2 verse 8. And yet, for over 1,300 years, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque have stood upon it, proclaiming a different faith. The question at the heart of our age is not whether the Temple Mount is sacred. It is whose it is. Shadows of history. History has a cruel rhythm in Jerusalem. In 586 BC, Babylon razed Solomon's temple. In AD 70, Rome destroyed the Second Temple. In AD 135, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Emperor Hadrian rebuilt Jerusalem as a pagan city and barred Jews entirely. In 637, Muslim armies captured the city, building their shrines upon the mount. Every conquering power has tried to stake a claim to this hill, as though holding it was the same as holding history itself. Yet the Bible says that the Lord chose Zion as his dwelling, Psalm 132 verses 13 to 14, and that he will restore his house in the last days, Micah 4 verses 1 to 2. History's repeating cycle is not random, it is prophetic. Each destruction has been followed by a return, each exile by a homecoming, and each desecration by the promise of a cleansing. The political powder keg. Modern political leaders know that even the smallest change to the status quo on the Mount can trigger riots across the region. The Jordanian monarchy guards its role as custodian of the Muslim holy sites. The Palestinian Authority warns of red lines that cannot be crossed. Neighboring Arab nations see the Mount as a symbolic front line. Yet behind closed doors, a different kind of conversation is happening. Some Arab states, now quietly aligned with Israel against Iran, are beginning to see the Mount less as a purely Islamic issue and more as a bargaining chip in a broader geopolitical chess game. Could this realignment one day make space, literally, for a Jewish sanctuary on the hill? In human terms, it seems impossible. In prophetic terms, it seems inevitable. The religious momentum. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has already prepared over 90% of the sacred vessels described in Exodus and Leviticus. Golden menorahs, silver trumpets, priestly garments woven in biblical blue and scarlet. They have trained Levites in the rituals of sacrifice. They have bred the red heifers needed for purification rites. Numbers 19. This is not theory, it is preparation. The movement's leaders speak openly now in Israeli media. Once ridiculed as extremists, they are invited to national debates. Their message: we are ready. The only thing missing is the permission to build. Every passing year, they gain more sympathy among younger religious Zionists who see the temple not as a dream, but as a national necessity. The prophetic parallels. The prophet Daniel spoke of a covenant made with Israel, only to be broken halfway through a 7-year period. Daniel 9 verse 27. Jesus referred to the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. Matthew 24 verse 15. The Apostle Paul wrote that the man of sin will take his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3-4. For these prophecies to come to pass, the temple must exist again. Which means, in prophetic logic, that any movement toward rebuilding it is a movement toward the climax of history. The world watches. It is not only the Middle East that watches Jerusalem. In Europe, nationalist parties invoke the city as a symbol of Western heritage. In Asia, Christian minorities pray for Israel's restoration. In America, entire churches build theological frameworks around the temple's future. When a Jewish minister declares, "The Temple Mount is ours," it makes headlines not only in Tel Aviv but in Tehran, Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. Global markets may seem far removed from this hill, yet history shows that a spark in Jerusalem can become a wildfire in the world economy, in military alliances, and in religious identities. The coming catalyst. Analysts argue over what could tip the balance. Will it be a miraculous discovery, perhaps the Ark of the Covenant itself, uncovered in an archaeological dig? Will it be war, forcing a redrawing of the city's governance? Will it be a charismatic world leader brokering a peace no one thought possible? Whatever the trigger, prophecy assures that change will come quickly. Isaiah says the Lord will do a quick work upon the earth. Isaiah 28 verse 22. Revelation speaks of events that unfold suddenly and without delay. The prophetic clock will not tick slowly forever. There will be a moment when the hands jump forward. The deception to come. Here lies the sobering warning. The Bible teaches that before Christ returns, a counterfeit will come. A leader who will seem to bring peace to Jerusalem, even making room for the temple, only to claim worship for himself. He will deceive many, performing signs and wonders. Revelation 13 verses 13-14. He will speak of unity, yet demand loyalty that belongs to God alone. This is why the true hope for Israel is not simply the rebuilding of the temple, but the recognition of her true Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. Without that recognition, the rebuilt temple could become the stage for the greatest deception in history. The fulfilled promises. For believers, the foundation of hope is what has already been fulfilled. Born of a virgin, Isaiah 7 verse 14. Matthew 1 verse 23. Born in Bethlehem, Micah 5 verse 2. Matthew 2 verse 1. Pierced for our transgressions, Isaiah 53 verse 5. John 19 verse 34. Casting lots for his clothing, Psalm 22 verse 18. Matthew 27 verse 35. These are not vague coincidences, they are precise fulfillments. And they tell us, if God has fulfilled these promises in Christ, He will fulfill the rest. The temple will rise again, not because of politics, but because God has said so. The question is, who will stand in it? The call to watch. Jesus warned, "Watch therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." Matthew 24 verse 42. This is not a suggestion, it is a command. To watch is not merely to observe events on the news, but to pray, discern, and remain spiritually awake. For just as the flag in the Jordan Valley signaled something deeper than nationalism, the movements on the Temple Mount signal something deeper than politics. They signal that prophecy is no longer in the realm of one day. It is in motion now. Jerusalem at the crossroads. The city stands at a unique intersection. Its ancient stones carry the past. Its current politics shape the present. Its prophetic destiny shapes the future. Jerusalem is both a powder keg and a promise, capable of sparking global war, yet destined for eternal peace under the reign of the Messiah. The psalmist said, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem." Psalm 122 verse 6. But in prophecy, that peace comes only after the shaking. The inevitable collision. Two narratives are colliding. The political desire for sovereignty over the mount. The prophetic timeline that demands a rebuilt temple. The first can be negotiated, delayed, even temporarily reversed. The second cannot. One day soon, these two currents will merge into a single flood, and the world will be swept into the most consequential chapter of human history. The last warning. The book of Revelation ends not with the temple of stone, but with the Lamb himself as the temple, Revelation 21 verse 22. The earthly temple is not the end, it is a signpost, which means the focus for believers must remain on Christ, not merely on the construction project in Jerusalem. For when the mount is reclaimed and the sanctuary rebuilt, the eyes of the world will turn there, but the hearts of the faithful must look higher still. The final image. Perhaps years from now, another photograph will race across the world. This time, not a lone flag in the Jordan Valley, but a completed temple gleaming on the mount. Crowds from every nation pressing toward its gates. Priests in white robes, trumpets sounding, sacrifices offered. The world will gasp. Some will rejoice. Some will tremble. But the truest fulfillment will not be in the gold or stone. It will be in the sky, when the Son of Man comes in power and great glory, and every eye sees him. And in that day the Lord himself will be the temple, and his reign will never end.